The series begins in a small town called Riverdale, a very quiet place where everyone knows each other. On the morning of July 4th, the town wakes up to shocking news: the disappearance of a young man named Jason. His twin sister, Cheryl, is found sitting by the river, completely devastated. She explains that she and her brother decided to take a small boat out for a ride on the river. In the middle of the day, something fell from Cheryl's hand, and when Jason leaned down to grab it, the boat capsized. Cheryl says she kept swimming until she reached the shore, but Jason has been missing ever since, and no one knows what happened to him. The police search the water for days, hoping to find his body, but they find nothing. Eventually, his family, the richest family in town, decides to hold a funeral in his name without a body. Jason's disappearance remains a mystery that confuses the entire town, and no one is able to solve it. One day, a beautiful girl named Veronica arrives in town with her mother, Hermione. They have come to settle in Riverdale after leaving New York. We learn that Veronica's father is currently in prison on forgery charges, which is why Hermione decided to bring her daughter back to the town where she herself grew up. Around the same time, a girl named Betty goes out to meet her friend Archie. It's clear that she has feelings for him, but she's too afraid to confess them. While they are talking, Veronica unexpectedly walks in, greets them, and the three get to know each other. They discover that Veronica is their age and will be attending the same high school as them. After a while, the first day of the new school year arrives. As Betty is getting ready in her room, her mother Alice comes in and advises her to focus only on her studies and not to make the same mistakes as her sister Polly. It turns out that Polly and Jason were in a relationship, but Jason treated her so badly that she fell into a severe psychological state and is now confined to a care facility, living there permanently. Because of this, Alice hates Jason and his entire family and wishes to get revenge on them in any way possible. She is also worried about Betty's relationship with Archie and warns her to stay away from him, believing that boys at that age are all harmful. Betty clearly isn't convinced by her mother's words, but she doesn't feel able to argue with her. Betty arrives at school and takes Veronica with her to show her around. She also introduces her to Kevin, their close friend, who appears to be very kind. Kevin mentions that there is supposed to be a big party at school to celebrate the start of the new year, but it might be canceled because of Jason's death, since he was a student at the same school and everyone is still mourning him. Later, all the students gather in the auditorium, where Cheryl gives a speech about her deceased brother. She says she doesn't want the party to be canceled, because if Jason were there, he wouldn't want to see everyone sad. The students then gather in the school courtyard to eat together, and Kevin and Veronica sit at the same table as Betty and Archie. It becomes clear that Veronica is impressed by Archie's personality, especially since he's handsome, loves music, and writes his own songs. However, she tries to hide her feelings when she notices that Betty is also interested in him and gets jealous. Archie then leaves them to attend football practice. As soon as he leaves, Cheryl comes over and sits with them, saying she came specifically to meet Veronica and hear her impression of the school. During the conversation, Cheryl mentions that she is the captain of the cheerleading squad and suggests that Veronica audition to join. Cheryl then leaves them and walks away. Betty explains that she auditioned the previous year, but Cheryl humiliated her and rejected her, claiming that she was overweight. It becomes clear that Cheryl is arrogant, uses her family's status, and treats other students in a condescending way. Veronica decides to train Betty so they can both audition together and challenge Cheryl. Meanwhile, Archie goes to the music room where he meets Ms. Grundy, the music teacher. It becomes clear that they are in love, but keeping their relationship a secret since the law forbids it, especially because Archie is still underage, and if their relationship were exposed, Ms. Grundy could go to prison. We also learned that they were together on July 4th, near the river, and that they heard a gunshot that day, but were afraid to speak up so no one would discover their relationship. Archie feels guilty and fears that the gunshot might be connected to Jason, which makes him want to talk, but Ms. Grundy stops him and warns him that she would go to prison. The next day, Veronica passes the cheerleading tryouts, while Betty is rejected again for being overweight. Veronica gets angry and decides not to stay silent. She stands up to Cheryl and confronts her, and this is the first time anyone has ever treated Cheryl this way. Cheryl feels embarrassed and is forced to accept both of them onto the team. Later, Betty asks Veronica why she did all that for her. Veronica opens up and explains that when she was living in New York, she was arrogant and treated people exactly the way Cheryl does. But after what happened to her father, she decided to change and try to become a better person. Betty then shares the story of her sister Polly and Jason, explaining that this is why Cheryl treats her so badly. The two girls continue talking and quickly grow closer in a short amount of time. The next day, the time comes for the school's back-to-school party. In the middle of the event, Betty notices that Veronica is attracted to Archie, which upsets her, so she decides to leave. Veronica feels disappointed in herself and tells Archie that she cares deeply about Betty and doesn't want to lose her, so she decides to step back and hide her feelings, choosing not to pursue him anymore. Archie, on the other hand, goes to Betty's house to apologize. Betty tells him that she isn't angry and that the only thing that really matters to her now is knowing the truth about his feelings toward her. Archie responds awkwardly and admits that he only sees her as a friend and has no romantic feelings for her. Even though Betty is hurt by his words, she appreciates his honesty and thanks him for being truthful. Later that night, Kevin is walking by the river with one of his friends when they are shocked to discover Jason's body in the water with a clear gunshot wound to his forehead. The entire town is turned upside down by the discovery, and everyone becomes terrified knowing that there is a murderer among them with no idea who it could be. Archie is overwhelmed with guilt, so he sneaks out of his house and goes to see Ms. Grundy at her home. Archie wants to report what he heard on the day of the incident, but Ms. Grundy convinces him that their testimony wouldn't help since they don't actually know who fired the shot. One day, Archie is surprised when Betty shows up at his house so they can walk to school together. On the way, Betty admits that she was upset about what happened at the party, which is why she ignored his calls for several days until she had time to process everything. She reassures him that she's no longer upset and agrees that they can go back to being close friends like before. That same day, Betty is surprised when Veronica brings her a bouquet of flowers to apologize for what happened. Because Betty is kind-hearted, she forgives Veronica immediately, without even discussing the incident. That day, Cheryl's friends sit with her and question how the police found Jason's body with a gunshot wound when Cheryl had claimed he drowned after falling from the boat. It becomes clear that they suspect Cheryl of killing her own brother, especially since she doesn't seem deeply affected by his death and behaves very normally. Cheryl defends herself, insisting that Jason really did fall from the boat. She guesses that he managed to reach the opposite shore, where someone was waiting for him and killed him. Later, Archie sits with his friends and plays his new song for them. Everyone is happy, except Betty, who is emotionally affected and remembers Archie's words about only seeing her as a friend. She breaks down, and although Archie tries to comfort her, he fails. Shortly after, Archie is surprised when the school principal calls him in for a talk. The principal notices that Archie has changed and suspects that he might know something about what happened to Jason. He urges Archie to share anything he knows before the police discover it themselves. Archie leaves in a panic and rushes to tell Miss Grundy everything that happened. While they are talking, Jughead Jones sees them together and realizes that they are in a relationship. That same day, Betty still feels hurt by Veronica, so she decides to distance herself from her, leaving her sitting alone and trying instead to get closer to Cheryl. Later that night, Cheryl visits Betty at her house. During their conversation, Cheryl claims that she suspects Betty and her family were involved in Jason's death, believing they did it to get revenge for what happened to Polly. Betty becomes furious and kicks Cheryl out of the house. That night, Archie is shocked to find Jughead waiting for him outside his house. Jughead tells him that he saw him with Ms. Grundy and noticed that something was going on between them. Archie is forced to confess everything, admitting that they are in a relationship and that they were near the river on July 4th. Jughead argues with him and advises him to go to the police before someone exposes the fact that he knew something and kept it hidden. The next day, a fight breaks out between some of the students and Archie gets injured in his eye. Betty then tries to fix her relationship with Veronica, apologizing for how she treated her. They agree to meet later that night outside of school. That evening, the two girls talk and decide that they will remain friends and that no one will be allowed to come between them or ruin their friendship. The following day, in the middle of class, Cheryl is arrested and taken in for questioning after the forensic report reveals that Jason did not die on the day of the incident. Instead, he was killed by a gunshot a week later. As a result, the police bring Cheryl in again to give a new statement. Cheryl becomes nervous and admits that she lied. She explains that on that day, she and Jason never went on a boat ride at all. Jason wanted to leave town and start over somewhere else, but he was afraid his family would refuse. So he and Cheryl agreed to fake his death by telling the town that he fell from the boat and drowned. In reality, Cheryl helped him reach the opposite shore so he could escape. They agreed that he would contact her later to let her know he was safe. Cheryl says that around that time, they heard a gunshot, but they didn't know where it came from. She waited for Jason's call until she eventually learned that the police had found his body in the river. The investigator asks Cheryl why Jason wanted to run away, but she refuses to answer. It's clear that the investigator suspects her, but he ultimately lets her go, since there is no concrete evidence against her. After that, Archie decides to confess what happened and admits that he was at the river on July 4th and heard a gunshot. When the investigator asks why he was there, Archie becomes nervous and says he was trying to get away from the noise of the town so he could focus on writing his music. He refuses to mention Miss Grundy in order to protect her. That same day, Betty learns that Jughead is writing a novel about Jason's death, so she asks him to work with her on an article about the case. Betty is a member of the school newspaper and is deeply interested in the stories published at school, but she is also determined to find out who killed Jason and what really happened. They decide to meet Dilton and question him, since Dilton is the leader of the scout group that found Cheryl by the river on the day of the incident. That day, Fred, Archie's father, finds out that his son lied to him and didn't tell the truth about what happened on the day of the incident. As punishment, he decides to ground Archie and forbid him from going out after school for 2 weeks. That night, Veronica goes out with a boy named Chuck, a student from their school who asked to see her and clearly seemed interested in her. The next day, however, Veronica is shocked to discover that Chuck posted photos of her at school, causing the entire school to start talking about her and questioning her behavior. Upset and furious, Veronica confronts him, but Chuck isn't afraid of anything, since he's the son of the school's star athlete. He mocks Veronica in front of his friends and challenges her, telling her he won't delete the photos. That night, Betty is sitting upset over what happened to Veronica, and after doing some research, she discovers that Chuck has done the same thing to several other girls. She gathers those girls together, and one of them explains that Chuck and his friends keep a notebook in the locker room. In that notebook, every boy's name is written next to the name of a girl from the school, and each boy is supposed to harass that girl to earn points. At the end, they see who scored the most points and reward the winner. The girl explains that this twisted game was Chuck's idea and insists that the notebook needs to be shown to the principal to finally stop him. Betty and Veronica decide to take matters into their own hands. They trick Chuck by pretending they are interested in him and convince him to meet them at night to hang out. They spike his drink with a substance that makes him lose control of his body, then tie him up and record a video of him confessing to everything he's done. The next day, they hand the video over to the principal, and Chuck is punished by being kicked off the team. Later, Jughead and Betty manage to track down Dilton, the scout leader. Dilton says that he was at the river on the day of the incident and admits that he fired a gunshot, but claims he was only practicing. He also says that he saw Ms. Grundy's car parked near the river. This surprises Betty, since she knows Archie was there at the same time, which makes her suspect that there is something going on between Archie and Ms. Grundy. She decides to investigate further. That night, she goes to see Archie and tells him everything she learned, forcing Archie to confess the truth. He admits that he loves Ms. Grundy and that they are in a relationship. Betty becomes worried about him because Miss Grundy is much older than them and is also a mysterious person that no one really knows anything about. The next day, Betty gathers more information and tells Archie that she looked into Ms. Grundy's past and discovered that she arrived in Riverdale only recently, and that before that, there was no trace of her at all. No one seems to know anything about her. Archie refuses to believe it and is convinced that she's a good person who truly loves him. So Betty decides to take Veronica with her and break into Ms. Grundy's car to search it. They are shocked when they find an ID card with the name Jennifer, and even more shocked when they discover a gun hidden inside the car. They inform Archie of what they found, and at that point, he begins to doubt her. Archie confronts Miss Grundy with everything he learned, and she admits that her real name is Jennifer. She explains that before coming to Riverdale, she was married to a cruel man who used to beat and humiliate her every day, until she finally managed to divorce him. She decided to leave town, change her name, and start over. Archie sympathizes with her and apologizes for doubting her. At the same time, Alice is cleaning Betty's room and accidentally finds the gun Betty took from Ms. Grundy's bag. Worried about her daughter, Alice continues searching the room until she finds Betty's diary, where Betty has written everything about Archie's relationship with Ms. Grundy. That night, Archie is spending time with Ms. Grundy at her house when he is shocked to see Fred, Alice, and Betty walking in. Alice has told them everything and wants to report Ms. Grundy to the police, accusing her of exploiting underage boys. Archie tries to defend her but fails, and Alice insists on having her sent to prison. For the first time in her life, Betty stands up to her mother. She threatens that if Alice reports Ms. Grundy, she will turn herself into the police and confess that she broke into Ms. Grundy's car without permission. After a long argument, Ms. Grundy decides to leave town in exchange for them not reporting her to the authorities. After that, Archie decides to focus entirely on his training because the school is currently looking for a new captain for the football team. Whoever wins that position will earn a scholarship at the end of the year, allowing them to study whatever they choose. Since Archie's lifelong dream is to study music, he becomes determined to win the role. So he dedicates all his time to training in order to be fully prepared for the competition and to make sure the coach selects him. During this period, the evidence related to Jason's murder investigation is stolen from the house of Sheriff Keller, who also happens to be Kevin's father. The authorities are convinced that whoever stole the evidence is the same person who killed Jason. At the same time, Hermione starts working as a waitress at the local diner. She feels humiliated because before coming to Riverdale, she was a successful businesswoman whom everyone respected. But after what happened to her husband, she was forced to take any job she could find to support herself and her daughter. It becomes clear that Fred is attracted to her, and he starts visiting the diner frequently. One day, the group of students is gathered at school when Cheryl approaches them and hands out invitations to her brother's funeral. She explains that the funeral rituals will be held at their family mansion and that Jason will then be buried in the family cemetery, which is also located on the mansion grounds. Veronica feels sympathy for Cheryl because of everything she's been through, so she decides to talk to her, comfort her, and try to fix their relationship. It becomes clear that Cheryl is actually kind at heart, but she deliberately presents herself as aggressive because she believes everyone hates her and uses that attitude as a form of self-defense. Cheryl takes advantage of the moment and invites Veronica to spend the day with her at the mansion, surrounded by her family. That night, Betty meets a young man named Trev, an old friend of Jason's, and tries to get him to open up so she can learn more about Jason. Trev tells her that Jason had changed a lot toward the end and that he had been secretly dealing drugs behind his family's back. Betty then gathers the courage to talk to her father, Hal, and asks why they refuse to let her visit Polly at the mental institution and why no one ever mentions her at home. Hal becomes tense and explains that during her final period at home, Polly's mental state was so bad that she once tried to take her own life. He adds that her condition had started to improve at the institution, but when she found out about Jason's death, she suffered a relapse. That's why they've been preventing visits, fearing it might cause another breakdown. Betty is deeply affected by what she hears and feels great sympathy for her sister. The next day, Betty tells Jughead everything she learned, and they decide to wait until the day of the funeral and use their presence inside Jason's house as an opportunity to sneak into his room and search it. Around the same time, Archie finds out that a famous and highly respected songwriter named Costello is currently in Riverdale. Archie decides to meet him and show him the songs he's written, but Costello crushes his hopes by telling him that his level is that of a complete beginner and that he isn't worth his time. Archie feels deeply discouraged and starts to suspect that Ms. Grundy had only been flattering him. That night, Veronica goes to visit Cheryl at her home as they had agreed. She sits with Cheryl's family, which consists of her mother Penelope, her father Clifford, and her grandmother Rose. During dinner, Veronica notices that Cheryl's mother treats her very harshly, to the point of blaming her for Jason's death. It becomes clear that Cheryl hates her family and desperately wants to escape that house by any means possible. Meanwhile, Hermione is alone at the diner when she is shocked to find that someone has left a box containing a large snake. Terrified, she calls Fred to come help her and refuses to contact the police because she knows exactly who is behind it. She explains that her husband, Hiram, had business dealings with certain people in Riverdale, and now those people are demanding the rest of their money and threatening her. The day of Jason's funeral arrives, and everyone is shocked when Cheryl breaks funeral tradition by wearing a white dress, the same dress she wore on the day of the incident. Cheryl breaks down while delivering her farewell speech, and Veronica rushes to comfort her. At that moment, Jughead and Betty take advantage of the distraction and sneak upstairs to search Jason's room, but they are shocked to find Grandma Rose already inside. She sees them and mistakes Betty for Polly because of their strong resemblance. During their conversation, Rose reveals that Polly and Jason were engaged and that she had been hopeful about their relationship and wanted them to get married. Later that night, Betty confronts her father with what she learned. Hal admits that Polly and Jason were indeed engaged, but that their relationship could not continue. We then learn that Jason's grandfather once had a violent conflict with Betty's grandfather and killed him. And from that moment on, a deep feud began between the two families, a feud that still continues to this day. Because of this revelation, Betty begins to suspect that her father may have been involved in Jason's death. Betty tells Jughead everything she has learned, and they decide to keep digging into the case together. The next day, the coach meets with Archie and his teammate Reggie and explains that he has been closely watching both of them over the past period in order to choose a team captain. The coach ultimately selects Archie, but Archie surprises him by saying that he has thought it through and believes Reggie deserves the position more. Archie explains that accepting the role would hurt the team because his true passion is music and he devotes most of his time to it. Reggie thanks Archie and happily accepts the position. One day, Betty manages to search her mother's bag and finds the address of the institution where Polly is being held. She gathers her courage, takes Jughead with her, and they go there together. Betty is shocked when she learns that Polly is pregnant with Jason's child, and that this is the secret her parents had been hiding from her. Polly explains what really happened, saying that Jason was not a bad person as everyone claimed. When she found out she was pregnant, she was happy and immediately told Jason. Together, they decided to run away and look for another city where they could live. July 4th was the day they planned to carry out their escape. Jason had left a car on the opposite side of the river and was waiting for Polly so they could leave together. However, Polly's parents found out everything and forcibly sent nurses to take her away and lock her in the institution. The shocking part is that Polly doesn't know anything about what happened afterward. She believes Jason is still waiting for her, worried and unaware of where she is. Betty is deeply affected and is forced to tell her that Jason is dead. Polly collapses in shock and begins screaming. At that moment, the supervisor intervenes and calls Alice to come handle the situation, and Polly is taken away and locked in her room. Alice scolds Betty for going there behind their backs, then rushes her home. There, Betty confronts her parents and tells them she no longer trusts them and suspects that they were involved in Jason's death. Both parents become angry and deny any involvement. Alice advises Betty not to believe anything Polly says, claiming she's mentally unstable and deeply affected by what happened. Betty decides to go to the river herself. If she finds Jason's car parked there, it will prove that he really was waiting for Polly and that Polly wasn't lying. That same day, Archie auditions for a talent competition for the people of Riverdale, but during rehearsals, he becomes nervous and can't sing. Veronica decides to help him, saying that she can sing, and offers to perform with him to support him during his first time singing on stage. At the same time, another band called the Pussycats, made up of 3 girls, is preparing for the competition, but 2 of them get into a fight. One of the girls, Valerie, decides to quit the band and leave. By chance, she discovers Archie practicing alone, sits with him, and decides to perform with him in the competition instead. When Veronica finds out, she becomes upset and feels that Archie replaced her. Angry and hurt, she decides to join the Pussycats just to provoke him. One day, Hermione approaches her daughter with a stack of papers and explains that her husband Hiram owns a piece of land in Riverdale. She has decided that Fred's construction company will handle developing the land, and she needs Veronica's signature to approve it. Veronica, however, knows that her mother and Fred have feelings for each other, and she fears that when her father is released from prison, her parents will separate and the family will fall apart. Because of that, she refuses to sign. Hermione secretly forges her daughter's signature, making Fred's company officially responsible for the project. Meanwhile, Archie senses that Valerie isn't happy singing with him, so he talks to her honestly and decides to help her return to the Pussycats. On the day of the final competition, Valerie performs with the Pussycats and is happy to be back with them. Archie, on the other hand, gathers his courage and performs alone on a big stage for the first time. To everyone's surprise, his performance is outstanding and leaves the audience amazed. At the same time, Jughead and Betty go to search for the car by the river. They do find a car parked there, but inside it, they discover a large shipment of drugs. They decide to report everything they've found to Sheriff Keller, but when they return to the location, they are shocked to see the car set on fire. It becomes clear that someone was watching them and decided to destroy the crime scene. Around the same time, they learn that Polly has escaped from the institution and has completely disappeared. The next day, news of Polly's escape spreads throughout the town. Jason's family suspects that Polly is the one who killed their son and begins searching for her to take revenge. At the same time, Betty, her friends, and her family search everywhere for Polly, but they can't find her. Betty suddenly remembers that Polly once argued with their mother and hid in the basement of their house. She guesses that Polly may have gone back to the same place. Betty sneaks down there and finds Polly sitting in the dark. Polly wants to escape the town because her parents are planning to put her baby up for adoption. Betty reassures Polly that she will find her a safe place and help her get out of town. Soon after, Jason's family learns that Polly is pregnant with their son's child. They sit down with Betty and explain that the baby changes everything, that their position has changed, and that they now want to help Polly in any way they can. They even offer to support her financially so she can find a place to live for herself and the baby. Betty believes that they truly want to help. That night, she brings Polly to meet them, but Cheryl arrives before the rest of her family and warns Polly. Cheryl insists that her parents are lying and that this is just a trap to get revenge on Polly. She tells her that if they find her, they won't let her live, no matter what. Betty becomes terrified for her sister, and after a lot of thought, they decide to hide Polly at Veronica's house. Hermione welcomes her in and reassures her that she is safe with them. The next day, Sheriff Keller discovers that Jughead had been involved in incidents years earlier. He also learns that Jughead was a very angry child and had many conflicts with Jason, which puts Jughead under suspicion and makes the police believe he may be connected to the crime. Jughead denies all of it. We also learn that Jughead's father, FP, is irresponsible, constantly drunk, and always at home, which explains why Jughead is often angry and emotionally unstable. Fred sympathizes with Jughead's situation and decides to lie to the sheriff. He claims that on the day of the crime, Jughead was working with him at one of his construction sites and even provides forged documents to support his story. He does all of this because he was an old friend of FP and can't stand watching that family fall apart. The sheriff believes him, releases Jughead, and FP shows up to meet his son outside the station. He apologizes for how his behavior has affected him and promises that he will try to change. Sometime later, Fred discovers that the land he is working on is involved in a legal dispute and that Clifford, Jason's father, has wanted that land for a long time. Clifford begins sabotaging Fred's work in every possible way, even bribing Fred's workers and luring them away with better pay. Fred doesn't fully understand the situation, especially since the land is registered under the name of an anonymous buyer. Around this time, he talks to Hermione and convinces her to quit her job at the diner and come work with him handling the company's finances. By coincidence, Archie discovers that his father is facing a serious financial crisis and that the company may go bankrupt soon. He decides to gather his friends and help Fred with construction work until he can hire new workers. One day, while they are working on the site, they are suddenly attacked by criminals, and one of the young men is beaten. Fred realizes that these are thugs hired by Clifford. Archie decides to take a group of his friends and go to the bar where most of the town's criminals hang out. He is shocked to discover that FP, Jughead's father, is one of them. Archie confronts Jughead, angry that he knew this and kept it from them. Jughead then takes Betty with him to confront his father, FP, and they ask him directly whether he had anything to do with Jason's death. FP denies any involvement and explains that Jason did buy a shipment of drugs from them because he was trying to raise money to leave town, but that it was the first and last time they dealt with him, and they never saw him again after that. During this period, they convince Polly to have a baby shower, a well-known tradition meant to celebrate the unborn child and express joy and anticipation. Polly decides to invite both her family and Jason's family, hoping to repair the conflict between them. In the middle of the gathering, Penelope offers Polly the chance to come live with them at the mansion, promising that they will take care of her and that she will be safe there. Alice interrupts her angrily and starts a fight in front of everyone, saying she will never allow her daughter to live with them under any circumstances. Polly breaks down, upset by their selfishness, and declares that their stubborn hatred is what caused Jason's death. She says that if they had let go of the past, she and Jason would have escaped together and lived happily. Polly also reveals that before the incident, her father Hal tried to take her to a doctor to force her to terminate the pregnancy, which is why she completely refuses to return home. Alice is shocked by her husband's actions, confronts him, and kicks him out of the house. Despite everything, Polly still refuses to go back home and decides to move into Jason's family mansion. One day, Archie is surprised when Cheryl comes to talk to him. She tells him there will be a party at the mansion in a few days and asks him to attend with her and pretend to be her boyfriend, explaining that she is lonely and doesn't have anyone else. Archie apologizes and says he can't do that. Later, however, he is shocked when Penelope herself comes to speak with him. To entice him, she tells him that a relative of theirs is the director of a prestigious music academy in the city. She offers to help Archie get into the academy if he attends the party with her daughter. Archie is tempted by the opportunity and eventually agrees. At the party, Archie takes advantage of Polly being there and pulls her aside to talk privately. He tells her that her family is extremely worried about her, especially since she hasn't tried to contact them even once since she arrived. Polly reassures him that she's fine, but she also admits that she suspects Jason's family may be involved in his death. That's why she chose to live with them, to stay close and try to uncover the truth about who they really are. After that, Archie notices Cheryl trying to get close to him in every possible way, which makes him uncomfortable. He decides to leave the party, even if it means losing the Music Academy scholarship. On his way out, he overhears Cheryl's parents talking and realizes from their conversation that they are the ones responsible for having Veronica's father sent to prison, which completely shocks him. The next day, Alice decides to publish an article in the newspaper she works for, exposing Jason's family and revealing their secrets. However, her husband Hal, who owns the newspaper, refuses to publish it and fires her instead, partly out of spite after she kicked him out of the house earlier. Furious, Alice smashes the glass in his office and storms out. Later, Betty suggests that her mother join them at the school newspaper, explaining that she would be free to write whatever she wants there. Betty's real motive is that she has noticed her mother's mental state worsening since Polly disappeared. After many arguments, Alice finally agrees to join them. At the same time, Hermione goes to speak with Fred and confesses that the anonymous buyer of the land is actually her husband, Hiram, who purchased it not long ago. She's afraid that Jason's family will discover the truth, since they desperately want the land and might do anything to take it. At first, Fred is upset that she hid this from him, but eventually he agrees to continue working on the project for a higher fee. Sometime later, Fred says goodbye to Archie because he's traveling to meet Mary, Archie's mother, to finalize their divorce paperwork. Archie is deeply upset and wishes his parents would get back together, but he can't convince them. Jughead's birthday arrives, and Betty decides to throw him a surprise party. Since Archie's father is away, they decide to hold it at Archie's house. Betty invites their close friends and even calls FP to invite him. Jughead is shocked. This is the first birthday party anyone has ever thrown for him. He doesn't seem happy, but he tries to hide his feelings. A short while later, Cheryl and Chuck suddenly show up at the party, bringing a large group of students with them. It's clear they didn't come with good intentions. Soon after, Jughead starts feeling overwhelmed and wants to leave, even though it's his birthday. Cheryl stops him and forces everyone to play a game where each person reveals a secret they know about someone else. Cheryl and Chuck deliberately choose this game so they can expose Veronica and reveal the truth about her father in front of everyone. They also bring up Archie's relationship with Miss Grundy and then start revealing several personal secrets about Betty. This leads to a huge fight between Archie and Chuck until FP steps in and throws Chuck out of the house. The party is completely ruined, and everyone goes home. Later, Jughead and Betty sit together at a cafe. Jughead explains that he grew up in a broken home and never celebrated his birthday, which made him feel unimportant and undeserving of being celebrated. That's why he gets anxious during social events and tries to avoid them. Betty sympathizes with him, apologizes, and says she only wanted to surprise him. During this time, Archie and Veronica's relationship grows stronger, and they decide to officially be together. The next morning, Archie is surprised when his mother, Mary, arrives to stay with them for a few days. He learns that the divorce has been finalized and that she came to check on him before returning to her home. Meanwhile, Veronica learns from her lawyer that her father's legal situation is very serious and that testifying in court that he was a good father who treated her well might help reduce his sentence. Veronica hesitates, since she has recently learned that her father hurt many people. After a lot of thought, she decides to testify truthfully, saying that her father was indeed good to her and that she never experienced anything bad from him. A few days later, there is an important school event. By this point, Veronica has started to suspect that her father may be connected to Jason's death, especially after learning that Jason's family were the ones who had her father imprisoned. She begins to think that her father may have contacted FP to have Jason killed. Alice also becomes convinced of this theory and decides to help Veronica uncover the truth. Betty, however, refuses to get involved because she spoke to Jughead, who insisted that his father would never do such a thing. Despite this, Alice decides to invite Jughead and FP over for dinner, while Veronica sneaks into their house to search for evidence, without telling Betty, so she won't get upset. Veronica asks Archie to go with them, and the two of them search the house more than once, but they don't find anything. They feel relieved and happy that FP turns out to be innocent and that all their suspicions were wrong. In the middle of the gathering, Betty finds out that they lied to her and went to search FP's house behind her back. While Betty is arguing with Archie and Veronica over what they did, Jughead overhears them. He's shocked and hurt that they doubted his father and went behind his back. At that same moment, they learn that the police searched FP's house and found a gun there, the same type of weapon used to kill Jason. FP is arrested, and the investigation officially begins. Jughead completely breaks down over what happened to his father. He locks himself in the house and spends his time crying. Archie and Veronica are confused about how the police found the gun when they themselves had searched the house and found nothing. They realize that someone must have planted the gun on purpose to frame FP. They take Betty with them and search everywhere for Jughead until they finally find him sitting in a bar, completely devastated. Jughead tells them that he tried to contact his mother so he could go live with her, but she rejected him and embarrassed him. They comfort him, and Archie assures him that they're certain FP is innocent and that someone is trying to pin the crime on him. Meanwhile, the interrogation of FP begins, and the shocking twist is that he confesses. He explains that Jason came to him asking for help to escape with his girlfriend, Polly, but he needed money. FP decided to give him a shipment of drugs to smuggle in exchange for good money. At the last moment, however, FP started to doubt Jason's story because Jason came from a very wealthy family and could have easily asked his parents for money. FP decided to kidnap Jason by the river and lock him in a remote location, planning to call Clifford and demand a ransom. Jason tried to escape, and FP used the gun and killed him. FP says he kept the body hidden until the police finished searching the river, then dumped Jason's body there. He also admits that he was the one who stole the evidence from the sheriff's office and burned the drug-filled car. Because of all this, FP is sent to prison. Late that night, Betty and her mother Alice wake up to the sound of someone moving around the house. They discover it's Hal, going through his documents. He confesses that he was the one who stole the evidence from the investigation office. He's confused as to why FP confessed when he wasn't actually the killer. Hal is forced to tell his family the truth. He reveals that he belongs to the same family as Clifford. Clifford's grandfather and Hal's grandfather were brothers, but after a violent conflict in which Clifford's grandfather killed his own brother, the family split in two and cut all ties. That's why Jason's family refused his relationship with Polly. They were actually relatives. At that moment, Alice realizes that Polly is in danger as long as she's living among them. She takes her family and decides to go get Polly. A confrontation breaks out between the two families, and Alice forcibly takes her daughter away from them. The next day, the three teenagers manage to track down one of FP's close associates, a man named Joaquin. They ask him about FP's connection to Jason and whether FP really killed him. Joaquin hesitates at first, then admits that one day FP called him asking for help. Joaquin met him in a remote place and saw Jason's body lying on the ground. He realized that FP had brought the body there to help cover up the crime, but Joaquin says he never knew for sure whether FP was the actual killer. He then reveals that FP hid a bag containing Jason's belongings in a remote location. The three of them go there and find Jason's t-shirt inside the bag. By coincidence, Betty discovers a flash drive hidden inside the shirt. The shocking truth is revealed when they watch the video on the drive. It shows Jason's murder, his own father. Later, it's revealed that Clifford was the biggest drug dealer in the town, a secret no one knew, until Jason found out and was horrified by his father. Clifford decided to kill his own son to bury the secret forever. He then went to FP and forced him to help cover up the crime. Clifford was also the one who planted the gun in FP's house and forced him to confess by threatening to kill Jughead. FP lied and took the blame to protect his son. When the police finally uncover the truth and go to arrest Clifford, they discover that he has already taken his own life. Although FP is proven innocent of the murder, he remains in prison on charges of lying to the police, falsifying evidence, and obstruction of justice. The town's mayor, Mayor McCoy, offers him a deal. If he names the drug dealers he worked with, his sentence will be reduced. She warns him that if he refuses, he could face up to 20 years in prison and gives him time to think it over. Eventually, the town begins to return to normal. Cheryl becomes calmer and apologizes to her classmates for the way she treated them before. One day, Jughead is shocked when a social worker informs him that they've started looking for a foster family for him. He's told that he must agree, especially if his father refuses to cooperate with the authorities and remains in prison. Jughead goes to talk to FP and begs him to give the names of the drug dealers. FP refuses, saying he's made too many mistakes in his life and deserves to be punished. He tells his son to live his life, forgive him, and says goodbye. During this time, Betty discovers a huge secret her mother has been hiding. Betty has an older brother. Alice and Hal were very young when he was born and decided to give him up for adoption. That's why Alice has lived her entire life consumed by guilt, hoping one day to make things right. Betty is deeply moved and begins to understand her mother better. One day, they learn that Cheryl has left home and is trying to take her own life. Everyone searches for her and eventually finds her by the river, about to jump. They try to stop her, but she's determined and throws herself into the water. Archie dives in after her and manages to pull her out, saving her life at the last possible moment. After that, they all try to move on and leave the past behind. Betty grows closer to Jughead and tries to make up for everything he's been through. At the same time, Archie and Veronica officially become a couple and make their relationship public. Cheryl, however, wants to erase the memories of the past, so she decides to set fire to the family mansion because it reminds her of Jason and her father Clifford. One day, Archie goes to have breakfast with his father at the diner when a masked man suddenly appears and opens fire on Fred before fleeing. Fred is critically injured, and Archie holds him in his arms, completely devastated. And that's how the first season of the series comes to an end.